Hey guys, welcome back to the Discipline Life Podcast, the place where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Aria, and this is my husband, Coda.
Hello, everyone.
On today's podcast, we are going to, again, be continuing our topic from last week where we talked all about submission and the role of communication within the role of submission, but we're going to be turning it into the role of the head of household, the role of leadership, and what that really means. Because I think that there is a misunderstanding about what these roles are, what they mean, and how they present within a relationship. And I think that the misunderstanding is that domestic discipline is male-centric, that the head of household is infallible and selfish, and that domestic discipline sets up a relationship style and a scenario where the submissive person, the submissive partner, is doing all the things, serving the dominant partner, and has no say-so, and that head of household uses his position of leadership to be selfish, to be self-serving, and to abuse his power within the relationship.
And it's none of the above. That's the answer for multiple
However,
choice.
I will say that this is one misconception, opinion that does have some validity because it
I'm not trying to
happen.
I'm not trying to make fun or make light of it.
It can happen,
It can happen. Sure.
When you're talking about healthy domestic discipline relationships, that should not be a part of a healthy domestic discipline.
But these are definitely misnomers, right? And this is a phrase I haven't learned, you haven't used in a few podcasts. But at the risk of sounding political, this is something that we see a lot in our society right now, especially in the political realm, and especially in some of the things that are going on, where if you are considered the leader of the relationship or the dominant person in the relationship, you're automatically labeled as an abuser. You're automatically labeled as someone who is selfish. You're automatically labeled as someone who only cares about themselves and only wants certain things, wants things a certain way in order to benefit them. And that's one reason we're talking about this, because we want to dispel those myths. They really are myths.
And even when those exceptions do happen, I do believe that they are exceptions, not the rule.
Correct.
The people that use leadership and use domestic discipline in order to gain a foothold for abuse, that is the exception. That is not the universal experience. That is not the majority. That is the few.
In fact, and I may have already talked about this on past podcasts, but obviously we're going to try to talk about this in more detail. I have always considered my role as a leader that a good leader is always someone who is a servant first. There's this, I've talked about this on podcasts before. There's a lot of good leadership books that I've read out there. And one of the principles that I've gotten from that is, and this was actually a principle that I learned from multiple books. They say a good leader always eats last. And what they mean by that is that a good leader, the reason they're a good leader is they know that their job is to be a servant to the people that are below them first. And so if there is a company dinner, that's the analogy that's used. If there's a company lunch or a company dinner, a good leader lets all the employees go first and they eat last. Because what it communicates to their employees is that they care. And so the point being with all of that is that a leader of your home always looks as that he's serving the other person and serving the people in his family. Because if you take any other approach, in my opinion, whoever is the dominant person in your relationship, if you take the other road of this person is here in a way to be my slave and to cater to me and my wants and my needs, that's when it gets toxic. That's when you start having relationship problems. That's when it definitely goes off the rails. But if you approach it from a very servant, humble point of view of what I am here to do is to make sure that everybody benefits, and the person that is counting on me the most through the rules and holding them accountable, my job is to help benefit them to make their lives better. It's amazing how, and I'm guilty of this, where the spotlight's on me and all my problems and everything. The moment I take that off of me and I remember that I'm responsible for people like Aria and our daughter and other people, and I take that spotlight off of me and I start caring about them and I start serving them, it's amazing how my other problems start to disappear because I'm caring about others.
I wrote an article for our patrons on our Patreon page. Link is down below if you want to get signed up for that. But I wrote an article all about service within domestic discipline and how, it can be very easy with the submissive partner to see that service because the service is usually tangible. It is usually very obvious how a submissive partner serves the head of household. However, on the other side of it, a head of household serves his submissive partner with his leadership. There is an act of service within leading, within taking on the role of the responsibility for the household, right? Because that's ultimately what you are choosing to do when you sign up to be a head of household. Is when you agree to this relationship dynamic, you agree to this role, you are signing up to be ultimately responsible for everyone under your leadership. You have to be responsible for yourself. You have to keep yourself accountable. You have to keep yourself in line, but you also are responsible to oversee and give accountability and give discipline to those under your leadership.
And yes, is that a big responsibility? Absolutely. Don't take that position of the dominant person in your relationship lightly. But that's also why I say if you approach it from a servant's point of view, if you approach it from someone who their job is to make sure that it's from a caring perspective, not a what can I get from it, but how can I help that other person, then you won't take it lightly. You will take it with a sense of this person is putting their life to a certain extent in my hands. They are being so trusting of me. They're entrusting part of their life and part of their personhood to me. And so therefore I should be responsible in that. And when you take that point of view, you do have a servant's mindset, because then you will say, I'm going to be very, very careful about the decisions I made, about the things I do, about how I approach this person. But also I'm going to do my very, very best to honor the things that they have asked me to honor, to hold them accountable to, because they're putting their life to a certain extent in my hands. And that's a very that can be a very scary thing, but I tend to look at it as, wow, what a gracious thing to do. And so therefore I don't want to abuse. I don't want to belittle. I do not want to squander the opportunity that has been given me by Aria in this scenario to help her become a better person and to help her better herself in her life. That's the responsibility that I have.
And you don't want to use your position to selfishly make demands that only serve you,
Yes, exactly.
This relationship style is not just a means to make sure that your laundry is done and your meals are cooked.
Oh, darn. Okay.
I mean, that's part of our relationship
Compared
structure.
to the way I cook, I'm so glad she cooks my meals. You have no idea.
That's part of our relationship
Yeah.
structure, but that was part of our relationship structure before domestic
Absolutely,
discipline.
absolutely. That wasn't something we just decided on, right?
And so this relationship structure goes beyond that to where you are saying, I am going to be responsible to make sure that you are well taken care of. I am going to be responsible to make sure that you are safe, that you are productive, that you're a good person, that you are representing our household and my leadership well.
And even if those of you who have religious beliefs of any kind, that you're representing those things well, because they all go hand in hand. Whatever your beliefs are, and whatever the things that you cherish and you hold dear, your ideals, that's the word that I'm looking for, that factors into that too. You're trying to say, look, I'm trying to make it good for everybody involved, so that and not that we should base everything that we do on what other people think, but in this situation, this definitely, you want to say, I want us to put our best foot forward. I want people to go, wow, this is a family, this is a structure that they seem like they really have some things together, and that they're moving forward as a unit, that they're moving towards goals together rather than separately. Because there's couples you've seen out there that they're like, oh, they're together or they're married or whatever, but they don't seem to be moving together. They're both moving in maybe in the same direction, but they're both on totally different paths. You know what I'm saying about that?
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say, like, you have talked a lot about, leading from a place of serving and having a concept of, responsibility and all those things. I think that this relationship dynamic only really works when you have two people that are more focused on how they can serve the other person opposed to or how they are being served. So
True.
I never go into a situation and say, well, Coda's leading in this way, but that's not really serving me, or that's not really beneficial to me. I'm going to withhold my submission, or I'm going to withhold my service because until he starts serving me. No, that I am always focused on, how can I fulfill my role? How can I serve my partner? How can I do what I need to do to benefit the person I love and the person who is counting on me in this relationship? How can I do what I need to do?
Well, benefiting the collective and the overall, the wellness of the family is important. But also, I would say, as the leader, one of my favorite books, and I've talked about this author before because he is a former NFL coach, and you all know how much I do love sports. Tony Dungy wrote a great book called The Mentor Leader. And it talks about how you are not just a leader of whatever job situation you're in, that he was not just a leader of men as a football coach, but he tried to lead his home as a mentor leader. Well, what is a mentor leader? It's someone who mentors or teaches, and again has that servant mindset. A mentor is someone that is always trying to serve the people that they are mentoring, serve them to benefit themselves. And so I would say that the mentor leader is what you have to be as the dominant partner. It is all about that servantship, that mentorship. And really, when Arya has told me, these are the things I need you to help me improve on, these are the things I need your help that I want to change in my life, she is saying, I need you to mentor me. That's basically what she's saying. I need you to help me become a better person, and therefore mentor me in order to help me reach these goals that I have. And so when you look at it from that point of view, you don't get a big head about yourself. You don't have this feeling of, well, that makes me superior. I am all-knowing. I am smart. I am this. No, it humbles you, or it should humble you is what I should say, to say, wow, again, this person has entrusted their personhood, their well-being, their safety, they have shared with me their most deepest secrets, and their deepest desires and their biggest challenges. They've entrusted with me with those things, and so therefore I'm going to handle it with the utmost care, with the utmost kindness, and with the seriousness that it needs to have in order to help them accomplish what they need.
While keeping in mind what is really beneficial to not only the relationship, not only the household, but to that person, right? Because there are times where your leadership is a benefit to you. There are times where you absolutely pull rank and ask me to do something because you need it to benefit you. But
Right.
but you don't take that lightly, and you
No.
don't abuse your position to where that's our entire relationship.
No, and then the reason I brought up Tony Dungy is he's the one that I've quoted before. I did it in the last podcast where he said that as the head coach, he sometimes had to override his assistant coaches because he just felt like it was a better call. But he said he tried not to do that necessarily all the time because he said then that comes a point where you are being a dictator. But he trusted those guys that he hired on his staff, and that's exactly what you're saying here is that I am going to still trust you and to talk to you and to ask your input and all of those things. And let me know if I'm jumping too far ahead. But this also goes into, because you probably have all wondered, okay, well then how does maintenance, spanking, and even punishments go into that? Because doesn't that make the dominant person more than the submissive person? Isn't that where there's the hierarchy there? Well, no, because then that is still should be looked at with the utmost care and humbleness, because this person not only has said, I need your help in these areas, they've also said, you must hold me accountable to the point that I'm willing to let you punish me where I fall short.
And most heads of household, most dominant partners that I have spoken to, view punishment as a necessary part of the relationship in order to maintain the discipline and in order to maintain the standards of the home, and to help facilitate that accountability. They don't discipline from a place of enjoying the process.
Yes, right.
They don't discipline for their own amusement. And they don't necessarily enjoy seeing their submissive partner go through that process.
Absolutely.
Of punishment. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a time and place for personal enjoyment, but that's not during punishment. And most people have made that distinction. And there have been rare occasions, and again, this is online communication, so who knows, how truthful or how authentic this person was being. But there have been occasions, one in particular that I can think of, where it seemed like he was approaching the disciplining of his wife from a place of personal enjoyment. And again, I don't know how authentic that was, but I stopped communication because it became uncomfortable. Because from what I have seen in the communication that I've had from sources that I view as being authentic representations of real relationships, that's not the universal experience. The universal experience is, as a head of household, I punish out of duty and out of service to my partner, not because I enjoy it. In fact, many people that I've talked to that have expressed this have also expressed that there are plenty of times that they would rather do anything else other than fulfill a punishment.
And I will tell you that's the case with me. She knows that I absolutely don't like having to follow through with punishments.
Which, side note, that makes the punishment so much worse, because I know that not only have I disappointed you, have I disappointed myself, I've fallen short of a rule or a structure or a habit, I put myself into the position of having to go through this punishment, and now I know that you know that you don't want to do it. Like, it makes it so much worse because I'm like, ugh, we could be doing so many other things, and I put us into this position. I created this entire scenario.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, that would you say that helps you not want to do that again?
That is part of the emotional process of punishment that creates that negative feedback that prevents future behavior from happening.
And so, again, me being the sports analogy guy, and we had been talking about Tony Dungy a little bit in this. He uses the same analogy of when he used to have to cut players. He hated having to cut players off of his team. He didn't want to have anybody without a job or have anybody that had to leave the team. And such as it is, you're not cutting your spouse off. You're not saying we're stopping this relationship. But I don't like necessarily giving out punishment, but I do it because that's what's needed in order to help our relationship grow. It's in order to help our relationship to continue to flourish. But again, that all comes from a point. I never at any point do I say that, oh, I'm just so excited I get to dish out punishment. No, it is not a fun process for me.
Well, and it also helps my personal development as well.
Or I hope so, right? I hope
that's the goal.
And so again, sticking with this idea of servanthood, a servant is never looking at things from a point, and this is very important, I think, looking at things from a point of view of how dare you step over this line, this idea of how dare you do this, how dare you do that. It is more of, I'm disappointed that you stepped over that line. I'm disappointed that you decided to violate X rule. It's more of a thing of disappointment and sadness other than how dare you violate the rules because you somehow made this better or worse. And the reason I say that mindset is very, very important to get is that's where it can potentially be. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes if they step over the line with the rules or something, it's not going to irritate you, that it's not going to, but you never want to punish from that point of anger. And also you want to be very careful with that because you also want to make sure that you're not, when you're, I don't want to say reprimanding because I don't ever reprimand you. And I don't know if do I reprimand you?
I use that word interchangeably with the lecture.
Okay, with the lecture. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I do, but what I mean is you need to be very, very careful because then you can come off as very dictator-like and start to treat that person like a doormat if you're not careful.
And I think it depends on your connotation of the word reprimand too, because I think that I look at a reprimand as a correction or a redirection, where some people, and this may be why you were hesitant to use this word, is kind of look at reprimanding as like a belittling.
Yes, that's why I was hesitant to use that because you never want to make your partner feel belittled.
Yeah, that's not the goal.
Yeah, and the goal is not to make them feel, because you're last time I checked, you're a grown woman, not to make them feel like a child, because the way that you parent a child versus how you lead in a domestic discipline relationship is different. And it should be different.
And that's something we had to learn in the beginning as well.
Oh, my gosh, yes. And when she says us, really, I'll point the finger at myself. That's really what I had to learn. I mean, correct me if you think I'm wrong. I don't know if I was terrible at that, but I definitely showed some, like, I didn't mean to, but I think I definitely approached it that way a little bit.
I think that you... the only connotation you had in your mind and only like representation you had of a hierarchical structure of authority and someone coming under that authority was that of a parent-child relationship. And so you were doing the best you could, but you were pulling from the only lived experience that you had.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, well, that's a whole nother podcast that I could maybe go into on Coda's Corner and tell you a little bit about my background and where it was hard. But I will save that for a Coda's Corner. Um, but that can be depending on your background. This is the part that I will say. Depending on your background, that may be something that you're going to struggle with at first, because you're going to try to figure out, okay, how do I hold this person accountable to the rules? Don't make them feel like I'm being a dictator. But also don't make them feel like I'm treating them like a child either, because of perhaps your past experience and how that has shaped you as a person. And that's why I say I'll save that for but you just gave me an episode topic. I appreciate that.
And Coda's Corners are available on our Patreon exclusively.
Yes,
So.
yeah, to mention that. And so I think the other thing that I would say is, we've talked about being a servant. We've talked about being a mentor. We've talked about that all of those things go into thinking about the well-being of this person, and really the submission side also is looking at it that way. I would then also say, though, knowing all of that, it can be a mistake to then think, though, because this tends to sometimes be a misnomer. But some people would mistake being a mentor and a servant as being weak, as not being strong. But we mentioned in the last podcast of the submissive partner having quiet strength. That's also important for the dominant partner to have quiet strength. Knowing when, and I've talked about this on past podcasts, the tender warrior. Knowing when to extend a hug or a kiss or love, and knowing when to pull out the sword and fight. That is a very, very important thing to distinguish. Now, when I say you don't pull out the sword and whack the other person.
Figuratively, there are no swords
right.
used in discipline.
That's right. No. But what I mean by that is you need to know when that person needs you to potentially be a little strict. Would that be a good word to use? Yeah. And when they need your gentleness. In the relationship, and that's very important. So it doesn't mean that you are a pushover by being a servant and a mentor, but actually this being knowing when to really toe the line and when to say we can have some flexibility.
Well, and I think that the temptation is that you're continuously having to battle is my self-development and the development of my submission is a benefit to you, but you do not want to lead from a place that you are thinking, how can I shape and develop her to my benefit?
Yes, very much so.
You want to be thinking about, how is this going to benefit her? How is this going to benefit the household? And ultimately, that will benefit you.
Yes, and you bring up a really, really good point, is that any moment I start to think from a selfish point of view, I've lost the whole reason why we're doing this. Everything, including how to bring down punishment or how to bring down correction, needs to be from that point of view. Okay, I need to not be lax here. I need to toe the line. But what benefits our relationship, and not, well, she violated the rules, therefore the hammer is coming down, and I don't care what the reaction is.
Well,
right?
and even beyond, she violated the rules. She inconvenienced me.
Right. Oh, yes. Right. Exactly. It was great. Right. She inconvenienced me by doing this.
She inconvenienced me, or she embarrassed me, or she's not, she made me feel
bad. No.
some sort of way, right? And if you're leading from a place of like, I can't believe that she was unable to XYZ. For instance, I've been sick the last week. Coda had to do a load of laundry. That's not normal in our relationship.
I actually had to remember. I'm sorry. This is going to sound terrible. I didn't realize how long, because she's done such a great job, how long it's been, though, since I've done a load of laundry, and I had to ask her, what do you normally set all of these settings on? Because, okay, this is side note real quick. When I was growing up, it was like hot, cold, and like normal and delicate. Now they got all these crazy settings on these like new washer and dry. I don't know where to put anything.
And our washer is such that
It's a great washer, by the way.
It is. It just resets all the settings every time you have
I
to.
don't know where to do things.
So everything's automatic and it
Yeah.
resets it to the automatic settings. So regardless,
I had no problem doing the load of laundry is what I'm trying to say, but I had a little bit of a learning curve.
because it typically I manage the domestics, but because I was sick, he had to pick up that slack so that
I emptied the dishwasher too.
he did.
Yeah.
And he wasn't tempted to punish me or to reprimand me or to feel negatively about that because he was coming from a place of wanting to serve me, to serve our relationship, and he understood that I wasn't misbehaving. I wasn't refusing to fulfill my duties.
Right.
I was sick.
And she was really sick. Well, you guys remember if you've seen the podcast, there was 2 podcasts before this.
And so it's from the standpoint of he could have been angry because he was inconvenienced because he had to do something that was outside of his typical job description, so to say.
For lack of a better term.
For lack of a better term. But he wasn't. And it's very easy to say, well, you were sick, of course. Like, what kind of jerk would do that?
You'd be surprised. That's all I'm going to say.
But it's one of those, it kind of goes back to that thing of if your motivation is she made me do something because she was unable to or unwilling to, and that's the motivation where I was inconvenienced, so therefore she needs to have a consequence. Rather than, wow, she was really disrespectful to me and we need to have some personal growth in that area so that we have more defined roles and so that we have a clearer expectation of what is and isn't appropriate.
And you just brought up a good point there, because it may seem very, very obvious that, okay, she was sick, so of course you're going to pause the rules, of course you're going to do. But even if it seems obvious, the leader, the dominant partner, whatever you want to say, needs to be able to know when things need to be paused, when things need to be, because she, to her credit, when she first got sick, she was really trying to rest and then stay on top of some of those things. And I was finally the one that when we were talking to say, honey, I think that we need to pause these. I will help out wherever I possibly can, because obviously I've shared with you guys I'm in school right now and I'm working my job and I'm doing it. I will help where I can, but I don't want you to feel pressure to have to do this. The best thing we can do right now for you is for you to get better, and then we'll get back on top of it. And I think that was good because you rested, and as you've gotten better, you started to get back on top of it. And I don't know, maybe to her dismay or not, but we're unpausing the rules starting tonight and getting back on track with a lot of things.
And actually, in our private Discord server for our patrons, there's been a lot of discussion on whether or not pausing, a complete pause, is the right course of action. So,
oh, there you go. That might be another podcast. So we need to talk. I know we've talked about pausing before, but maybe. So all that to say, that's another call that you have to make. But I didn't make that. I honestly did not make that call with, believe it or not, as obvious from the standpoint of, well, she's sick, so I'm going to pause the rules. No, I actually did think about it for a minute. Like, okay, I know she's sick, but should I pause some of the rules? Should I pause all of them? Because I knew there were certain things that I thought, well, even if she's sick, these may be good to still be going. And really what I decided to do ultimately was, no, I think the best thing to do is to pause all of them. And but again, we talked about that.
We did, and I think because like Coda said, we're kind of getting that ball back started right now. And I think that we'll have to communicate about like how that went, because I do think that this particular time was a little bit of a learning curve.
It was.
And
Because she's actually a very healthy person. She doesn't get sick very often, but when she does get sick, it's really bad. Like, you get really sick.
And obviously we'll have to talk about this further privately, but I'm not 100% sure that pausing all of the rules was the right course of action.
Right, and we haven't had a chance to really talk about that. And what's funny is the reason she brings that up is, or I'm glad that she brought that up, is because as I started thinking about it, I thought, oh, there's a couple of these rules that maybe I shouldn't have paused, because maybe that actually would have helped her a little more. But again, it was kind of a new thing.
And we are continuously learning through this as well.
Oh, yes. And so to wrap it all up, I think this is where I would want to leave you. Always remember, as the dominant partner, that you are to mentor and to serve the other person. And that is because you're coming from a place of love and kindness. And ultimately, you have the well-being and the future, to a certain extent, of another person's growth in your hands. And so never take that lightly. Never use that as a way to dominate and hurt the other person, to be the dictator, not dominate, but the dictator over that person. And so always remember, it's for the good of the team, if you will, not for the good of being selfish or yourself. What do you think?
Yep. And
okay,
just
way to sum that up that way.
I was about to say, just make sure that you're leading from a place of understanding the responsibility of your role, not a self-serving place. So
thank you guys for joining in.
if you want to see this podcast in its video form, as well as get other perks, please consider joining our membership on Patreon. The link to that is down below. Thanks guys.